How much impact will Bill Belichick have in Chapel Hill? And will the Tar Heels make a serious run at Faizon Brandon?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into The Portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making The Portal your first listen each and every day. We're here to talk recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal. So come in and check us out every chance you get. And today we get a special opportunity. I never thought I was going to be talking about recruiting and Bill Belichick in the same sentence. But we are, and it's going to be rather entertaining for me, and I hope it is for you. Faizon Brandon, transfer portal, NIL. Allegedly, North Carolina's got a ton of it. So to help me make sense of all of that, Isaac Schade is here. Locked On Tar Heels. Brother, thank you very much for coming on. Yes or no, when you first heard, first time, somebody threw the name Bill Belichick at you, besides laughing and saying curse words because you thought it was an idiotic thing to say, what shot did you give it? 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10? What did you think when you originally heard that name?
You know what's funny, Brian? What's funny is the laughter and random words was absolutely my first response to it. But you know what's weird was it's like if that's gonna be something somebody says, I was like, there's got to be some level of legitimacy to it, right? Because you wouldn't just be like, you know, who would be a great fit in Chapel Hill, North Carolina? You know, right? Like, you know, what are we doing? So I was like, okay, like 5 out of 10, because it's like that's not out of thin air. There's got to be something to it, but. I think I was with a lot of people initially on like, this is just a play to then be able to parlay back into the NFL. But it like, as it started to unfold, it was like, no, this is real. And as other people doubted it, I was like, you guys, like just from things I was hearing inside and stuff, it was like, there is legitimacy to this. Sounds like the NFL doesn't want to give Coach Belichick a chance. So let's make it happen.
It's amazing to me because if there was ever a very stiff piece of concrete that just couldn't break, it was a one-way trick. No, you know, this is what I do. It's Bill.
Yeah.
And now he's in Chapel Hill, this massive institution that is just full of life in the Tri-Cities. It is about as big a fish out of water as you can get. So we'll get into his impact right off the bat. Explain to people what you know, or at least what you've heard, about how he's going to deal with the NIL. I've heard there's going to be separation of churches. I mean, he'll talk to kids, but he's really not driving that bus. Is this an accurate depiction?
It sounds like it. I think he has had more involvement in it than I initially anticipated he would in terms of recruiting. Like at first I was like, it's just going to be like Dion, right? Where he's just not even going to touch it. And that it would be all on Mike Lombardi to do all of it. And then that they would just go back and forth on that, which is great because the two of these guys have been in lockstep with each other for forever. Right. And then we start seeing back in December, it was funny because it was literally at the same time as there was all that, oh, Bill Belichick hasn't signed his contract and there's all this stuff. He's never going to actually coach a game in Chapel Hill. Literally as all that was coming out, I'm being sent pictures from him at like every high school in the state of North Carolina visiting guys. And it's like, why would he be like, go with me logically on this, Brian. If I have zero intention of coaching a college football game, why on earth would I waste any ounce of my time going to high schools and visiting kids, right? Like that's nonsensical to me. And so the whole time it was like, okay, he is going to be more involved than I think a lot of people thought he would. Another thing that I would say too, that from talking to people, and as you said, from what I've heard, is like who Bill Belichick, the character, was in New England, I think is a very different person than even some of who he actually is and who we've already seen him to be in his short time so far in Chapel Hill. Is like, oh, he's not just a robot. Yes, he's going to hold everything close to the vest because why would I give you an ounce if you're opposition? But I think there is a different humanity to him than maybe a lot of people originally thought or knew.
Well, I can't wait for the memes to come out. Obviously, the stuff about, you know, his girlfriend and all that is a rage, and that's fun too. But I'm just looking at this from a football perspective. Bill is a guy that knows how to coach, but it's a very intellectual defense, if you will. How does that translate to the college level? How much of it is he going to, because he knows like they don't have the same time in college. It's not even in the same stratosphere.
Right.
So they do nothing but game plan for like 5 hours and go to practice. That's not how it works in college.
That's right.
Most schools. So that's no story. But
yeah, I'm curious to see how that translates because like I play a lot of fantasy football, Brian. And one of the things I always remembered in the Bill Belichick era is like, if I've got my stud going up against the Patriots D, I'm going to seriously consider benching him because I felt like week in and week out, it was like, all right, we're going to make somebody else beat us and just shut this guy down or let him go off and shut everybody else down. And it's like just all of that intricate game planning that you're talking about. Like, is there enough time to install that? You've got a week before and after Clemson. Carolina's got open weeks on either side of that. I think you got plenty of time to prepare for that because you got 12 days or whatever it is. But on a normal week-to-week cycle, when you mix in class and NIL promo shoots and stuff like that, like it's a great point you make. Like, will there be the time to have the level of depth that they are looking for? And how permeable is he to be able to switch to like, okay, I don't have the level of in-depth capability with these guys, and they aren't the level of football player as the guys I dealt with at the NFL level. So how capable is he of dialing that back a notch or adjusting it to work in the college game? The more quickly he can figure out how to do that, the more successful he will be.
I agree. And that also impacts the next follow-up. Recruiting wise, you got to know when you meet with the kid, okay, can I at least get along with him? Those kind of things are basic. But is this a guy that's going to be able to pick up on some of this? I'm sure he's going to try to run the 3-man line and do some like 3-3-5, different stuff. It's a more complex. Some guys will shift it back and forth, 4-man on one play, stand up backer, the Lawrence Taylor position that he coached when he was with the Giants.
Was he any good at football? I've never heard of him.
There are rumors of it. You can call Joe Theismann. Okay. I'll never forget that play. I saw it live when I was a kid. And
Did you really?
Oh yeah. I saw that live. Little kids shouldn't see that play. But anyway, I stopped what I was doing. My eyes were bigger than the room. But it's one of those things when you look at his scheme, if he can figure it out, and the state of North Carolina is loaded with talent traditionally, and New Jersey kids, PA kids, all the people from the Northeast are moving down. Charlotte's the biggest banking hub of the South. I know, debatable if North Carolina's in the South. That's another topic for another day. But
You're talking to an Atlanta boy here, Brian Smith.
That's right. That's probably the more likely hub. I digress. The point is still the same. North Carolina is increasing its population every year. If you can keep, let's say, 60% of the kids home to play for the Tar Heels yearly, and you're not a top 15 team, you have failed.
Yeah.
That's how I would look at it. Over a 4-year period, you got to get him a chance to do things.
Sure.
But even with Bill, with the portal, we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. If you add in a few key NIL guys they get from the portal that truly buy in with what they have locally, why can't North Carolina be one of the top 3 to 5 teams in the league in football? I've always said, like, they ever got the right coach, that school could kill it. Tell me why I'm wrong, or am I?
You're not. You're absolutely spot on, right? And I think so many people often think about it's competing against Duke and Wake and NC State to keep those kids in state, but it's not. And like we'll talk about Faizon later, but right, like he's a Tennessee commit, right? It's keeping guys from going to SEC schools or up back to the Big Ten. And so that is more the competition than the other 3 ACC schools in the state of North Carolina. That is the big concern for me. There are so many kids that have said, man, what an honor for Bill Belichick to come to my living room or to come to my high school. Like, can he parlay that into it being more than just an honor and actually like, so I'm going to now go play for him. That's the key, is how can he and Mike Lombardi do that? What I love about these guys, you were talking about the defense and can they get the right pieces to fit whatever scheme, whether it's the 3-3-5 or something else they've got to adjust to. They've talked over and over and over again. Mike Lombardi is great in interviews, by the way. I'm so all in and sold on him. But talks about, I know who Bill wants and Bill knows who he wants. And so we are going out looking for specific traits that we have identified over our decades together as the dudes that can fit and play with us. And as we well know from every little white slot receiver that worked along with Tom, right? Like they can get guys that fit what they're trying to do and make it happen. And so sometimes you might see a name or a number of stars next to a kid and be like, why does he think that's going to work? He doesn't have the talent or whatever, but because they've identified who they want and need, they can make it work. Will that work? The big question, Brian, that we have no way to answer yet till we see it on the field at Keenan, maybe this year, but maybe 2 or 3 years from now, is, again, does that work in college the same way that identification worked in the NFL?
And if it doesn't, he'll move on and retire and be happy with an incredibly beautiful girlfriend. So he's good to go either way.
Well, she's still going to be enrolled in classes at Carolina at that point, Brian. So we'll no, here, one other quick anecdote. This is hilarious. I had been waiting on the actual announcement, like this is actually happening. And the week in December the day, my family and I were leaving to go to Disney World, like the next morning. I'm scrambling, doing everything I can to get ready, get podcasts recorded. And then that night it becomes official. I'm like, what? Come on, man. Have you no respect for the job a podcaster has to do here? What are we doing?
That's how it works, man. It happens all the time. A kid commits, and then that's 15 minutes after I did a show. That's
exactly.
not right.
Exactly. Welcome to our life, everybody.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When we come back, we're going to talk about some impact recruits for the Tar Heels, talk some Faizon Brandon. That is next here on The Portal. This message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes with dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. Now Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress. And you get the most money back, guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. This is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Carolina's 25 class was massive. Had a lot of kids in it. Had 2 quarterbacks. There were a lot of kids we're kind of not sure if they're going to make an impact. I want to give Isaac a chance to talk about that. But one kid in the class that I do know about, because I'd seen him multiple times at Elite 11s, is Bryce Baker, and I loved him. Great kid. Anybody that has a chance to meet Bryce will be happy. He's a good dude. His family, good people. And I think North Carolina will like him overall. Plus, he's an in-state kid. That doesn't hurt either. Top 200 recruit, number 155 by 24/7 Sports. So what are the expectations for Bryce? Anybody else that you have in the class to potentially make an impact in Chapel Hill year one?
It's funny, Brian. I remember you and I have been talking about Bryce for what, 3 years now. I remember when we first started talking about him. I had him on Locked on Tar Heels a couple times, folks. If you want to go back and listen to those interviews, as you said, just a sweet kid, man, but a killer on the field. I love who he becomes when he's out there. Excuse me. Playing, and it's great stuff. He's obviously been on Carolina's radar for a long time, committed. And then there was the typical thing where it's like, is he going to stay committed to Carolina? Is he going to go somewhere like Alabama or whatever once they start pursuing? And I love that even after Coach Brown was gone and Coach Belichick comes in, he reaffirms his commitment to the Tar Heels and he's all in. I love that about him. The question is he the dude right out of the gate? As we know, Carolina in the Mac Brown era was great at the quarterback position, from Sam Howell to Drake May, until last year, Brian Smith, when, Max Johnson comes in. I was never sold on that, if I'm just being completely honest, that he was going to be the guy. Unfortunately suffered that. We talked about Theismann, whichever pronunciation, version he is. Max Johnson has that gruesome leg injury in the first game of the season against Minnesota. And then the rest of the season is a Connor Harrell, Jacoby Criswell situation. And Jacoby Criswell ends up being the guy. Well, Brian, heading into 25, Max Johnson's still recovering. We're not sure when he will be fully back and ready. Connor Harrell's gone in the transfer portal. Jacoby Criswell is gone for the second time in the transfer portal from Carolina. And then you have Bryce Baker coming in. You've got Ryan Brown coming in from Purdue. That's another one of those where people are like, hang on, he's not a dude. He's not a guy. but it's that whole thing of like, has Bill Belichick, I've been able to identify who he wants, an unsung quarterback who, if you identify it correctly, might be a guy. There's some people that had optimism about Brown last year. And so it's like, is it Ryan Brown? Is it Bryce Baker? That's what we're going to have to wait and see. But interestingly, another one of the potential impact incoming freshmen for Carolina is quarterback Torrey Newkirk out of Norfolk, Virginia. Virginia has been a fertile recruiting ground for Carolina, not just in state. He's not a name at the same level Bryce Baker is, but he's the per 247, the 22nd, ranked quarterback in the class. He's 6'3", 200, right? Like he's got some requisite size there. Probably needs to bulk up a little bit. But I don't know what to make out of this quarterback room yet, Brian. I'm really curious for spring practice to start and see what happens.
Well, to that point, they got some other guys. They got some edge rushers. They got some guys I'm not as sure about. I'm going to let you pronounce the name of the young man from Los Angeles. Go ahead and fire away if you want to do that. Give your own pronunciation.
Yes, Brian, I've been, this is an edge from the LA area. I've been pronouncing his name as Chinedu Onyegoro. I have not been able to find the correct pronunciation on him yet, so I'm hoping we get that soon. I love it on a roster when they have the guys pronounce their own names. It's like, man, anyway. I'm really interested in him. He's one of Carolina's only just couple 4 stars in this class coming in the class of 25. Obviously, it's been a tough freshman recruiting situation because, as you said, the 24 class was pretty big. Even before Coach Brown left, the 25 class was not going to be very big. And then when Coach Brown is gone, that even thins it out more. And so you really don't have a ton of impact coming in, specifically in terms of incoming freshmen in the class of 25, outside of these 3 guys at the top. And then there's some other guys that I am curious about that are basically 3 stars that either I really like their names a lot or they have some interesting skill sets that I'm curious to see. A guy like Tyler Hauser, who's a linebacker, that, as you and I were talking pre-show, seems to maybe be a Belichick type linebacker, right? And so there's some of those that it's like, are they ready to pop right now? But whether they are or not, year 2 or 3, I think there's some great possibility there.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was just one particular player and then a broader view of North Carolina for 26. If I don't mention Faizon Brandon to you and we're talking about North Carolina, there's something wrong. Now, I know people that wear orange are throwing things at their computer screens. I know Faizon, he's a good kid, tremendous talent. He's from North Carolina, but he's committed to the Vols. Yes, the Tar Heels took 2 quarterbacks in this past class. I like Bryce and all that. But Faizon as an athlete, holy moly, like receiver, free safety, whatever he wanted to do, he could play it, but he's a really good quarterback too. So committed to Tennessee. Do you expect UNC to make a serious run at him all the way through?
That's a great question. They've been trying to already. He committed to Tennessee back in early August. I think it was like August 3rd, if I'm remembering correctly, Brian. And it was enough of a story that when Bill Belichick, when it was announced for him coming to Carolina, Faizon came out with a statement about it. Like, I think North Carolina hiring Bill Belichick is a great decision, but I'm fully in and locked in with the Vols. I think locked in was the exact phrase he used, if I remember correctly. But the thing is, this is a Greensboro kid, for folks who might not be aware, from Grimsley High School. And it's somebody that you've got to stay in contact with. So yes, while he has reaffirmed his commitment to the Vols, you just got to keep checking in. That's part of how football recruiting works. You guys, we know this, right? Anybody loyal to the portal here with Brian knows that about football recruiting. So you just keep checking in. You just never know if you're going to catch him on the right day. And here's another part of that too, Brian. Whether he goes to Knoxville or not, in this day and age, you simply can't burn bridges. You got to maintain relationships because you never know what's going to happen in Tennessee. And then after a year or two, if it's not the right fit, it's like, hey, Faizon, seems like maybe things aren't going as planned. Would love for you to keep thinking about maybe coming to Chapel Hill, right? Like that is a very real thing in this day and age. And so, yes, Carolina would be dumb to not continue that pursuit at an appropriate level, right? Because you got to know where that line is. You don't want to overwhelm him. You don't want to turn him off to you by being that scorned girlfriend who keeps coming back and hoping you'll get back together. But I think it is going to be incumbent upon them to keep contact and keep checking in. Similarly to what they're doing, by the way, with Kendra Harrison, the top tight end in this whole deal, who's also a great basketball player, who's right now committed to Oregon, another North Carolina kid. Seems like whether it's right now or after year one, when he's like, I'm tired of living in the Pacific Northwest, I don't care what Nike throws at me, get him home too.
That's one of the weirdest recruitments in the country with him. Oregon for a kid from North Carolina. But I digress. I'm just here for the fun. But when we come back, the transfer portal, NIL, and Bill Belichick, what do they all have in common? Well, they're going to be all getting together in Chapel Hill. That is next here on The Portal. How do you think Bill Belichick's biggest pitch will go for a portal guy? Like Bill getting excited, getting a kid on the phone that's transferring from going from Alabama. I would love to see that video chat. Like if they could screen record that and just post it to X and Instagram, I'd truly be in favor. I'll speak for Isaac. I know he would like it as well. How does that work? Like how does Bill pitch somebody who's got 1 year of eligibility? Do I want to trust this Belichick guy? Can he hand it? How does that work? I'm fascinated by it.
People who are listening to this and not watching it are not going to get it, but I'll explain it right after.
Yep.
He holds up his hand with a whole bunch of Super Bowl rings on it, and he says, that speaks for itself, right? That's what, going to Carolina basketball, that's what Roy Williams would always do. He would just sit down with his hand across his knee and just like tap that little ring finger with one of those championship rings on it. And then it's funny to think about the conversation though, because his just like very even keeled demeanor, Bill Belichick. Hey, I'm really good at this, and you need to cut right. Like it's just like you just don't see him being this crazy, personable kind of guy. Like compare and contrast Bill Belichick to Mac Brown's demeanor, right?
Oh wow,
wildly different, Brian, right? And so he goes in, and he has been visiting these high schools in these weirdly ill-fitting suits alongside these massive human beings. It really is hilarious. But if I'm Bill Belichick, I've got to recognize where my bread is buttered. And that is not on being some big affable guy. Yes, as we talked about earlier, I think we are seeing a little bit of different humanity in him right now. But I think for him, it's about going in and finding kids that are football heads and talking X's and O's. Here's where you fit, and here's how we're going to win. I think if I'm Bill Belichick, that's my best version of this, and that's what Lombardi's trying to do as well. And let's be honest, in this day and age, it's like, and here's the money. That's the bottom line. Take it or leave it. I can help you get to the NFL. This is, to your point, it's a kid with 1 more year of eligibility. If there's anybody I'm going to entrust that to, it's somebody. Yes, he might not yet have the college coaching experience, but somebody that's done it at literally the highest level of the sport for a long time.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like there's a different way to sell it. It's just I wanted the entertainment value. I want to see Bill do it. Like him to try to be funny, like an opening one-liner. That stuff could go viral. Like it would be 8 million, views in 6 hours or something. It could just be hilarious.
Well, and we've seen some of that, like in his McAfee appearances, right? Like,
oh god,
every now and again it'll come out, and he actually laughs. Brian, that man actually knows how to laugh.
I didn't know that. I literally didn't know, but that's why college football is fun. I think he feels like he can let his guard down and be a little different because he's with younger people, and it's not just a professional environment. Maybe I'm wrong on the reasoning.
No, I think he realizes he needs to.
That's what in recruit, like in the draft, you don't like me, too bad, me draft you. It's just the way it is. In college, that's not how it goes.
100%. And the thing with North Carolina is this has never been a school that's all in on football. Right now, the way to be all in with anything is to say, show me what you're writing on that check. What is the bottom line with this thing? And Carolina, from a financial investment standpoint, both to NIL and to Bill Belichick, has gone all in with this thing. And so from at least that standpoint, they've put the things in place that they need to. As you said, the fertile recruiting ground is there, and they're able, because of the Belichick name, able to pull kids from all over the country now. And that's what it's got to be. Yes, you've got this fertile backyard recruiting ground, but if Carolina wants to be a national power, they've got to recruit nationally. That's not been something they've historically done in football. Basketball, yes, absolutely. But now they're trying to say, hey, we want to get our football program to our basketball level. And Brian, the funny thing is, for me as a North Carolina podcast host, that's where most people are tuning in, is the basketball side. And now basketball people are wondering, like, hey, are we going to commit that same level of financial resources to basketball? Because we're a basketball school and we don't want to be outdone by football. So it's kind of interestingly flipped in those weird ways right now.
I'm curious how many of the boosters that are all in, this is just for fun, all in for football are also hoopers. And how did it, because like, I'm sure there are different people in the athletic department. They're more in charge of this sport. That would be some interesting conversations. And that's part of the dynamics. A dollar only gets to spend once. Either it's going to this direction or to this direction. So
that's right. And Carolina's NIL, they have codified, consolidated, whatever you want to say, all under one umbrella. It's called Oldwell Management. And so, there's no longer a separate football and basketball collective. Okay. It's all under one entity right now. And so that is part of that dynamic as well.
Well, that's a whole nother show within itself that I'll have to talk to you about, because that's still fighting, because the guy over here is under basketball.
That's right. That's right.
There's going to be, there's just no way around it. That's guaranteed. To that point, is there anybody out of the portal that you think will make an impact for the Tar Heels? Or let me rephrase that. If they don't, things could go sideways, because that defense needs a lot of help. I know that. Anybody that you at least want to, like, look, we need to see what this kid can do in spring.
Yep.
Please, God, help us.
Younger Coach Belichick coming over from Washington brought a couple guys with him from his defense. I'm really interested in Thad Dixon, the cornerback. I'm really interested in Peyton Waters, who's a safety. We got a couple of these guys. Jason Robinson, who's a wide receiver coming over from Washington. He's actually reached out a couple times on Twitter. So I started to see some of that engagement with him, just like, hey, I want to win over these Tar Heels folks. So he started tagging a bunch of Carolina podcasts and stuff in some of his posts. So there's those guys, and there's some others that I'm intrigued by, but got to wait until we're in and going. Another, I forgot to mention Kamori House, also a linebacker coming over from Washington that I'm really intrigued by. So to your point, I mean, gosh, as we record here in mid to late February, we're not that far away from starting to see the product in spring. And that's another factor. Bill Belichick, as we said earlier, famously is only going to give you what he has to give you. I don't know what we're going to even see or have access to from spring football practice from Bill Belichick. That's a dynamic I do not know what's going to happen with.
I think they're going to all but force him to show it, because they need to have it for recruiting purposes. They got to do it.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that will be like Bill talking to whoever UNC uses for their athletic department, the mouthpiece, and that's fine. But they got to show guys literally running into each other, making loud grunting noises. There's no shortcut on that. It is football. Large men hitting each other is what the sport is. It's violent.
That's right.
And I'm not saying he's going to give away his calls for a three-man front switching to a four-man front, but at the same time, there's got to be some of that, because he needs to recruit, and the recruits are going to want to know. The easiest way is social media. That's what those accounts for UNC are going to be able to do. So you might get a little more than what Bill likes, but it still probably won't be a ton, I'm guessing, because it is what it is. Isaac, why don't you tell everybody where they can find all your work, brother?
Oh, man, absolutely. I am, as Brian said, the host of Locked On Tar Heels. You can find me. I'm most active on Twitter at Isaac Schade, just my name, but also, very active on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky, whatever, all that stuff. Also, for those of you that are basketball heads, I'm also the co-host of Locked On College Basketball. Obviously, it is prime time for us right now. Yes, we're coming down to it, just a couple weeks away from conference tournaments and Selection Sunday. So if you're into that side of things, come on and join us over there as well.
Yeah, this is a wild year for the tournament. There are about 10, 12 teams that could possibly win. I know Auburn, Alabama, Florida, some of those teams are the fave, but it wouldn't shock me if somebody else won it either,
Dude, Brian, it's wild. The state of Alabama is the epicenter of college basketball right now. And if you had told me that the first ever 1 versus 2 matchup we would have in the SEC was a basketball game, I would have laughed at you. But there we go, a 1 versus 2 in the Iron Bowl, basketball style, a couple weekends ago.
That is the world that we live. You can find the portal wherever you get your pods, Apple, Spotify, and on YouTube. Just go LO the portal to find us. Locked On's the portal is going to be around every day. Come back and see us. We will see you again later today.